Yes, we are live on YouTube now. So just few things are getting set up right now on YouTube. And we have wonderful guest over here from Switzerland, my favorite country, which I already Great. All set. Wow, we have a lot of people in the house, and please feel free to put it in the chat where you're joining from. Meantime, I'll just set up all the things. Here we go. Perfect, and I'll share my screen.
Should I unshare mine?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, you can do that.
Override that. Okay. So I hope you can see my screen now, and sharing. Okay, what happened over here? Oops. Just a second. Yes. Now this goes perfect. Great. Can you see my screen? Somebody
Yes.
can. Yes, perfect. So welcome. Welcome back to Microsoft Saudi Arabia Excel Power Platform Meetup. And we all are here today. And we have a lovely guest joining from Switzerland. But before I introduce quickly, I have some exciting news for you, and which I'm going to quickly share it on this meetup session. So most of you know me. I'm Faraz Shaikh. I'm based in Saudi Arabia, and I have a website, Excel Exciting. I'm writing blogs and an Excel Power Automate, and you can find me over there. And as usual, my mission is with the community, with my friends. Felix, who is over here, all my past friends. Our objective is to give an easier solution to the community so that it can help them and make their life easy. So the exciting news is we have a summit, My Data Summit, which is going to take place on 5th, 6th September. It's a mega event where we have around 33 sessions taking place, and we have a great session lineup of all the speakers: Bill Jelen, Ken Buzz, Matt Ellington. There are great names over here, and they are going to deliver some massive content on the My Data Summit side. So make sure that you register for this event, and you can definitely get a discount code. If you use this Faraz-10, you can get that discount code. In fact, we also have some masterclasses which has been going to take place that time, which will be on Power Query, time intelligence, budget forecasting, and budget practices with Liam Bastek. Sandeep Chopra will be explaining about tax, and we have visualization in Power BI and financial modeling, data techniques, and some amazing stuff are happening around. And let me quickly just walk you through the website which we have over here for the My Data Summit. So this is the website. If you come over here, you can get all that speaker lineup over here. You can find a list of all the speakers. And if you just hit any of the speakers, you can just drill in more. Let's say that I just clicked on Bill Jelen, then you can get more information about the summit session. And if you click on the summit session, it will direct you to all the page agenda, which is there. So we have massive agenda being lined up over here, and the agenda for the masterclass as well. And definitely you can go and buy the tickets from here, and you can just enjoy it. So let me move out from here. let's go to the next slide. So today's session, we have Felix. Felix is my friend from Switzerland, and I know him. I've been quite following him, with related to Python. If I wanted to learn anything, when I Google it, I always come across some content related from Felix. And Felix is an author, and he has this company, xlwings. And I got a chance to invite Felix to Microsoft Saudi Arabia Power Platform Meetup Excel. And it's really an honor to have you, Felix, over here. And he is, by the way, from Switzerland, a beautiful country. And I have been to the place where he stays very nearby. So I hope next time when I get a chance, I'll definitely go and see Felix over there in Switzerland. So Felix will be talking about power of Python in Excel and some things, really interesting things, which I'm also excited. I don't know what's inside the box for us. So on the hot seat, we have Felix. Over to you, my brother.
Thanks, Faraz, for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me. I guess I'll just start by sharing my screen.
Yeah, sure.
It's only going to take a minute or two. All right. Cool. All right. So you should see my slides, and if not, then just shout. But I assume Zoom does its magic. So for today's meetup, what I've prepared is basically just three things. I'm gonna obviously introduce myself a little bit. Then I'm going to explain. I'm going to explain to you why I've been spending so much time over the years and to look and spend on the topic of Python and Excel in the same sentence. And then basically we're going to run through a couple of little demos to see firsthand how this all works out. And I guess it's probably easiest if you probably put your questions you have maybe in the chat, or maybe you hold them back until I switch over to another section, or maybe at the end. I don't really know how you usually handle this for us. I mean, I'm also okay. If you want to jump in and want to ask a question directly, I guess that's probably fine. Yeah, maybe you have a format that works best for you, Faraz. I don't know.
Sure, whatever is convenient for you. We can take it at the end, or you
Okay.
like to jump in between, no problem.
All right. So if you have questions, just make sure to ask them at some point, and then we'll definitely answer them. If not right away, then definitely at the end, by the end of the session. So also I mean, from the title of the meetup, I would probably assume that it's not everybody is proficient in Python. So I would assume that this is sort of a higher level introduction into the ideas, and then also sort of what you can do with it without going too deep down to every line of code. So giving you a bit of a broad introduction of why it may make sense, if you haven't done so yet, to maybe look a little bit more closely into Python and knowing about how the two worlds can connect. And so this brings me to the introduction about me. So most people probably know me from xlwings, which I started back in 2014. As an open source project. It was and remained to be a pure open source project for about 6 years. And then probably 2.5 years ago, I decided to add a pro plan to it. So basically make it open core to basically be able to spend more time on maintaining and developing, pushing more features. However, the Pro plan is also free for non-commercial use, and it's also basically, the source code available. So it's still super close to the open source version. Today, we're going mostly after the open source version, but we depend a little bit on how we manage the time today, but we are possibly going to have at the very end of the demo a quick look at what the Pro version has to offer there. So that much about xlwings. We're definitely going to look into it a little bit further during the second part of this meetup. So we're definitely going to come back to xlwings, which is my Python for Excel package. But we're also going to talk about the other packages. Then I did write a book last year it came out last year. It's sort of also geared towards advanced Excel users, but Python newbies. So it has 4 parts. The first one is, an introduction into Python. Then the second one is an introduction into sort of like the scientific tool set. So mainly pandas and a tiny little bit of NumPy libraries, numerical libraries in Python. And then we have in the part 3, we basically learn how to read and write Excel files without having to rely on Excel, the application. So that's mainly by using pandas and some of the other libraries that we will also get across today. And then the fourth and last part is basically an introduction into xlwings and how you can automate Excel, the Excel application, and can kind of like remote control it from Python. So that's if at the end of the meetup you decide that it's a topic that quite interests you and you would like to dive a little bit deeper into the topic, most likely this is a good match for you. Then lastly, I'm also the CEO at Excel Trail. You notice it's a similar name. It does a similar thing somehow. It enhances Excel with another tool. So in case of Excel Trail, it's not Python, it's Git. And Git is a version control tool. It's a source control that if you program with any programming language, most likely you're going to use, and that allows you to see the differences between different versions and see like who wrote what. And so we sort of like adapted it to work with Excel. So as you can see here on a screenshot, you're able to like diff or compare Excel workbooks, the sheets, and see what formula changed. And this also works, by the way, for VBA code. It works for Power Queries. So it can be quite useful if you manage large Excel workbooks that are mission critical and that shouldn't contain too many errors. So that's what I do apart from xlwings. I like to tweet and post on LinkedIn quite often. So if you want to sort of like hear about my latest blog posts or the latest xlwings releases, etc., it's probably a good idea to follow me if you're interested in the topic. I do also have a YouTube channel. It's called xlwings. I'm not a YouTuber by profession, so I do not post new videos every couple of days, but I do post them whenever I do have new material. So definitely worth checking it out. There's also past meetups from my end. There's also most recently, like something about VBAs and not even about Python and Excel, but usually it is about Python and Excel. All right, so that much about myself. And as I promised, now I sort of want to like give you a bit of a motivation why I've been spending the last probably more than 8 years now on that topic, or at least a large chunk of my time on that topic. And just to kick this off, Microsoft used to run a feedback forum on user voice, and at some point that was slightly after I started to basically create xlwings, well, it's almost 2 years later, somebody added the idea to add Python as a scripting language. And back then it sort of like jumped to the most upvoted idea ever on that forum, like by a big margin. And it's been quite some time, as you can tell, November 2015. Funny enough, the last update was done last year, so a little bit more than a year ago. That was like roughly just 10 days after I published my book. So that was like funny coincidence that the topic kind of got in the news right after a couple of days. Unfortunately, it's been more than a year now. We don't know anything else or any other thing than what they posted here. So officially, they're still looking into it. And we can still, like, cross our fingers that at some point they will add native support for Python in Excel. But today we don't really know much more about it. In the meantime, they also sunset the original forums. So these days they have a new forum where they sort of like trashed all the votes down to 0, and so like currently it isn't #1 anymore. Anyhow, so why do people ask for a new automation language? So I guess the reasons are multiple reasons as usual, but for me, one of the reasons why people are looking for something a little bit more elaborate than VBA is sort of like the formula we're looking at, right? So it's a cell formula. It's sort of like it's not even made up. It's just it's basically taken from the COVID-19 essential supplies forecasting tool, which was a tool provided by the WHO. And a lot of countries used that Excel tool to, calculate the safety goggles and gloves they had to order in order to fight this pandemic. And so part of like how many gloves most likely your country ordered was based, partly on these on these formulas that you see here. And I guess the striking thing about that is it's super cryptic, right? I mean, it's impossible sort of like to look at it and understand what's going on. And by not being able to do that, it's also sort of like it's difficult to like have it automatically tested. It's difficult to like see if there's an error. It's difficult to review, right? So like all standard like code practices that have emerged in other, well, in let's say standard programming languages, they are hard to do in Excel. And so we sort of like just look at Excel as, just an ordinary programming language. And it just is sort of a bit lacking the tools that ordinary languages have. And so Python has a lot in its tool belt that, give you the tools that you need to properly work with coding languages. And I guess, the new Lambda functions, they probably help in that regard, in that hopefully these sort of like cryptic, long cell formulas will disappear, but they don't, I mean, they still like, they don't give you like testing frameworks. They still don't give you like a nicely integrated source control. So you still sort of are on a little bit on your own on that end. So these issues, they also like regularly lead Excel to like come out in the news in sort of, sometimes it's a little bit pushed up, but still, there's a point to it. Like on the lower left, the London whale from JP Morgan, that was like a big trading incident, and there was like a series of Excel workbooks where they were doing copy paste. So it wasn't necessarily an issue with Excel. It was about how they were treating Excel, and also they had like a logical formula error. And again, it's like they didn't have the tools like to put like safety nets in place. So that's a little bit like where Excel has an issue, not because of Excel as such, but because sort of like the tooling around Excel is missing in my opinion. And then so like when we switch over to Python, it's well, the Stack Overflow, the title here is actually from a Stack Overflow blog, which is linked in the source below. So Stack Overflow wrote about the incredible growth of Python, and the chart that we're looking at is as you can see here on the left hand side on the y-axis, it's the percent of Stack Overflow questions per month. And as you can see, like Python was really flat at the early 20 until 2012 or so, and then it sort of started to take off, and all of a sudden, like everything is done in Python these days, from web development to machine learning and scientific computing to, I don't know, like scripting. There's lots of things going on, and so naturally, with when a language grows that big, it comes with a lot of things, and so one of those things is that it has an incredible ecosystem of packages. So like, I don't know, you have a system X in your company and you want to connect, or you want to automate something, you want to pull data from that system into Excel or into anything, then there is a Python package. Most likely there is a Python package for that, and one that works well, one that's usually well maintained and that you can easily install, basically with and that's sort of like the second point, with a single command you can install a package and you get the functionality that you need. And so that's sort of like one of the main issues with the like still predominant automation language in Excel, which is VBA. VBA doesn't have a package manager, and like every time you start a new project, you have to go back to an old project, you copy paste VBA code in the code editor, or you just take a template. You take usually an old project and you just build off that tool. And so what happens is, like, you have 25 different projects, they all almost use the same code, and if you notice an error somewhere, you have to fix it in all the 25 different projects that have slightly different code, because the code evolves over time. And so that's one of the biggest deficiencies in my eyes of VBA. It doesn't have a package manager. It doesn't have a dependency system. So you are always presented with that manual and error-prone copy pasting work. Now, Python, as I said previously, is very strong in the scientific computing environment. And what you would previously do in environments such as MATLAB is nowadays very often done by just using a scientific package in Python, such as NumPy, SciPy, and pandas. And so that's like another main reason why Python is so, why so many people would love to work with Python, because it's got all the linear algebra stuff, it's got the statistics stuff, it's got that machine learning stuff these days, etc., etc. So it's all there. You can effortlessly work with arrays. These are all like features that are very hard to do in VBA, and if you find them, or if you can do them, you usually, again, like you end up on a forum, you copy paste like a page of VBA code, and then you just hope that it does what it's supposed to be doing. And other than that, we have got in Python, it's a modern language. So like, VBA has stopped a long time ago to evolve in the sense of like the language features. And so, for example, like error handling is a bit old school. So like the, on error, resume next, that's it's not a pattern that like any of the other programming languages would still use today. yeah, like just working with arrays is sometimes incredibly hard, cumbersome in VBA, even though there is arrays available. And like, you know, there's some object orientation that are like inheritance that isn't supported if, you know, for people who are who like that. So that's like sort of like where Python and like all the other languages really, apart from VBA, have an edge there. And then what I personally find is sort of like astonishing that nobody really at Microsoft thinks to you know, think that seems to think that this is an important step is it doesn't give the user an integrated sort of like testing framework. So there is no way of like creating some safety net that your 50 megabyte workbook, after a thorough reorganization of the sheets and tabs, is still doing what it is supposed to be doing, right? And I mean, these are like the most, well, I mean, these are the most common reasons why we can read about Excel in the news, because it doesn't have like these professional tooling that you usually would need to maintain a large code base. And I mean, I say even code base, like even if you just use Excel with formulas, it's really just hidden in the cells. It's still sort of a programming environment. And then lastly, on this list, Python is cross-platform. So the good news is you can use it on Windows, you can use it on Mac, and you can use it on Linux, which all of it is just a superb thing to have. Excel is somewhat limited in that regard, so definitely not existing on Linux. It does nowadays work on the web, sort of, still missing lots of features. Mac also has more and more features. So like just recently, they finally brought pretty much a full version of the Power Query editor to Mac. That's taken them a really, really long time, but so finally sort of Mac does catch up with it. Mac does work with VBA, but it has you know, some limitations. It can't handle all the code that sometimes you would use on the Windows side, which makes it very cumbersome to maintain VBA code that works on both platforms. And so the other reason why I personally love Python is that it doesn't lock you into a spreadsheet, right? So like, I mean, you can definitely do a lot of things these days with the Excel provided tooling, and the thing is, it's starting to become a bit you know, all over the place. Like on Windows, you can have VBA, you can have M, which is the language in Power Query. Then you can have DAX formulas, and then you can just recently also can have TypeScript, which is, or basically Office script, the way they call it, which first came out on the web and then now is being introduced. I believe it's still beta, I'm not sure about that, on the desktop too. So like you're presented with a myriad of options these days. Some of them probably, well, you could call them legacy as they're not further developed, like VBA, but then also some others, you know, bleeding edge, like Office script, that is just really currently being rolled out across all the platforms. But again, JavaScript or TypeScript has the issue that it doesn't have all the packages that Python has in the computational corner, like where usually programmers are. And then also, I guess Python is usually looked upon as super easy to learn. It's like a super easy language, and most of the time Excel users are not professional programmers, and so, you know, if they need less time to become productive in Python versus, let's say, TypeScript, then that's usually where they say yes, because they try to solve a business problem. Usually it's not their full job. And so before we switch over to the more interactive part, where I can show you how everything sort of like looks like in practice, I would like to introduce sort of like the different type of Python packages that are available to automate your work with Python for Excel. And so basically we have two different types of packages. And the first one, the upper diagram here is what I call the reader and writer packages. And these packages, they are pure Python packages in the sense that they only need Python to run. And so you do not need a dependency on Excel. You can run them on Linux and it works perfectly fine. They directly read the Excel files or write the Excel file. So super helpful, but that's, depends a little bit on your use case. And we're gonna switch over to the demo in a moment and see like what typical use case we would use these packages for. And so the situation on that end is a little bit, there's a ton of like different packages. So like we have OpenPyXL, which is probably the most popular one because it's sort of, it can do most of the things, like it can do both reading and writing. Then we have XLSX Writer that can only write, and then we have a bunch of other packages. And the issue here is a little bit that all of these packages, they are made for like basically the XLSB, for XLSB format, you would need that package. For XLSX format, you would need that package. For the legacy XLS package, you would need XLS format, you would need this package to read, this package to write. So it can be a little bit confusing. So pandas, which is the Python statistics package, sort of like the go-to tool for data analysis, and probably one of the reasons why Python had such a growth over the last couple of years. Pandas sort of like wraps them up and gives you a little bit of an easier API to work with. So we're going to have a look at this. And the other way of dealing with Excel and Python is sort of really automating the Excel application. So in that case, you cannot run it on Linux because it does require you to have an Excel application, and it really does directly change or remote control the Excel application and not the Excel file. So if you write a file, for example, and that's where xlwings does the work. So if you write a file with xlwings, what you really do is you tell Excel to write a file, right? So that's like a very important distinction to make here. And I've seen like a lot of confused people out there, who ask questions on Stack Overflow or the GitHub issues. So like, I guess that's a very, very important distinction to make. So two different modes, either read and write files directly, no Excel needed, runs everywhere, or then xlwings approach. You can do interactive stuff, but you need to have Excel installed. And these two approaches are really, they are really complementary. So sometimes you can even combine them. So we're going to see now a little bit better, like when you would use what approach and like how this looks in practice. And so before we switch over here, as in some introductory notes, very often like researchers or people who do data analytics in Python, they use Jupyter notebooks. We're gonna see, like, for those who have never heard of it or never seen it, we're gonna use it in the demo, so you can see what it is. And sort of like what I've seen happening in the industry is that for very technical teams, some of the very technical teams, they manage to actually replace Excel with a combination of Jupyter notebooks and pandas. And that is because sort of like they take care of like the same issues. So both of them can analyze data. Pandas is sort of like, you can think of pandas as your spreadsheet in Python, as we will see in just a minute. And Jupyter notebooks, they can visualize the data, so like Excel charts, etc. So some very highly technical teams are sort of like ditching Excel in favor of that. But then as soon as you move a little bit outside of the very technical teams, I have seen that, or I've made the experience that there is still Excel, required, because often the boss of an analyst, they do not like speak Python. They do not want to like run through a Jupyter notebook. They just want to see the results in an Excel workbook, right? Or I don't know, like you may get Excel files delivered to you as a data source. So that's still super common these days. Nevertheless, so yeah, a few advantages here are like why people would do that. You don't typically run into the same issues as with Excel. So like the formula is never hidden away. So it's sort of like that's one of the obscure things in Excel. The formula is always hidden away, right? You always see the value. And that doesn't happen there. And also you can deal with hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes of data, and it's actually not an issue at all. And for Excel, that size would be an issue if you can't use like a Power Query, let's say, to read that data in. Right, so that's about it. So let's switch to our first part of the demo. And for that, I'm going to pull down this here. So as I said, so this is a Python Jupyter notebook in Python. And let me see, maybe if I can make that a little bit bigger so it's a bit easier for you to read. If I still need to make it bigger, then please just maybe for us, you let me know. Or maybe, I don't know, like, are there any questions at this point that it makes sense to take care of? Not from the chat, from what I can see. Okay, cool. So anyhow, so
the YouTube, Felix, what is the difference between Jupyter, Panda, and Python on the YouTube?
Right. So I mean, that's a good moment to probably answer this question. So Python is really just a programming language, right? And a Jupyter notebook is sort of like the environment. A Jupyter notebook can act as your code editor. So you typically have in Python, you have like a text file where you write your Python code, and then you can run it, let's say from a command prompt or directly from your code editor. But then often people who do scientific work, work with data and visualization, they work in Jupyter notebooks, because in Jupyter notebooks, they can not just have the code, but they can have, as we will see in a minute, they can have the charts, the visualization, and they can structure. I mean, they can sort of like design a document out of it. So like that's what I'm saying. Like it's got a lot of like things in common with Excel, because in Excel you would also like put in like a header, like a title in your spreadsheet, and then you have like the formulas in the cells, and then you can see like, well, the output of these formulas, and then you would also like drop in a chart. And that's also like all the things that like the Jupyter notebook makes easy to bring together in the Python world. And it's a very beginner friendly way of getting started, and of playing around with the language. And so, for example, here you have a cell which is a markdown cell, which means that it's going to be formatted. So like you can format a title by using the hash sign here, and you just click on Shift Enter, and then that code cell, or that markdown cell will be executed. And so you can see the formatted table. And then this here is a code cell. So this is code we want to run. And so like by hitting Shift and Enter, or by just hitting this play button here, you will actually run the code. And so at this point, nothing has happened yet, because we're just like importing the libraries. And so that is, for those who are really new to Python, that is, we basically make the functionality of a third-party package available in our code. And so basically pandas, as I was probably mentioning before, so pandas is usually your go-to library when you want to work with data, for data analytics, for statistics. and we're going to make use of it. So really think of a pandas data frame, which is the data structure that you work usually with in pandas. Think of it as a spreadsheet, so basically as a sheet in Excel. And to just give you a bit more flesh to the bone, let's just start using it, and everything will become a lot clearer. So I've got a directory here of Excel files. So like this is actually like taken from the book, from a sample from the book. So you have a lot of sales data here in two different workbooks, in two different folders. And one is the new format, one is the old format. And so we're going to see the new January. So let me just open that real quick for you to get an idea how that Excel file looks like in the original. Once the Excel is done with updating, so we can see it. So it's really just a couple of columns, a couple of thousand rows, I believe. Yeah, a couple of thousand rows, some sales data, like basic stuff. And so pandas now gives you the option to read in that file. And as you can see, it gives you back a data frame. And as I said, the data frame, think of it really just as your Excel spreadsheet. So, having these two next to each other is very, very similar. So you're really just looking at a spreadsheet here in the Python world. And so what you see here is, okay, it doesn't print all the rows, because typically you would have millions of rows, and obviously that doesn't fit on a screen, and it's usually not so easy to scroll through all the data. And so what you would do usually is you can just say, okay, give me some info about that data frame, and it's going to tell you what columns there are, and like how many values you got in that column, and also like what data type it is. And since this is an Excel file, and an Excel file that has been properly formatted, you can actually see that a date is actually translated into a date time format here in Python, or within the pandas data frame here. And then we have like an amount as a floating point number, and then where you see like object is basically where is text or a string behind it. And then you can also pull up some statistics here just by calling the describe function method here on the data frame. And so that is usually a little bit more interesting. I mean, the way that the data is presented, basically like sales amount for different price plans here isn't super interesting. But like if you have a data set where all these statistics measures make sense, then that gives you a much better first impression of the data by looking at those figures. And so in the next couple of cells, what I'm going to do is just really I want to give you like a sort of like a feeling for how aggregation, like how aggregating all these single sales data over those 24 different Excel workbooks, how that works in Python, and making use of pandas. And really, I mean, here the connection to Excel is really just we use Excel as a data store. So it's really our data source. And as I was like on one of those slides showing you, we're using pandas as sort of like the high level interface to read all these different data files. As you saw, they are both XLS and XLSX. So pandas gives us the ability here to loop through all those files and read in the data before we then move on and sort of like aggregate the data over the different files together. And yeah, I guess if you had to do this with pure Excel, you would like link through different through different files, which is always ugly, or you would have to use the Power Query. In that sense, other than that, I believe it would be cumbersome to do without Power Query, to be honest. All right, so what we're going to do here now is really just we're going to, in that sales folder here, and we tell it to read every file that ends with XLS and an X or no X. And then we're going to read them into DataFrames, and then we're collecting them here in a list, the way that Python calls them. In VBA, that would be a simple array. And so as you can see, like the XLS X, they are a bit slower moving, but when we then get to the XLS, they are actually even faster to read in. And then once we have them all in, there is a simple concatenation command here that we can use to put all these different values in a single spreadsheet if you want. So like we've now already managed to read the first sheet from those 24 spreadsheet over different formats like x, and we have combined them in a single big spreadsheet here. And so again, I used the concat command here, but again, I wouldn't want to go too deep on the single commands here. It's just probably more of a high level thing to show you in the sense of, how Python can interact with these files and why that can be a good idea. And so you can see that we have 160, a little bit more than 160 rows down here. And one of the, I mentioned it previously, so one of the good ideas that you can always do is you can use the info method here to get a little, more detail on what's behind that huge data frame here. And so this time it's a little bit more interesting because what we can see is we usually have these 160 rows, 160,000 rows. But then we do have one column that has substantially less rows, so only 93,000 rows. And the reason for that is that basically, these two folders, the structure of the file was a bit different. So in one of those here, we don't have a status, right? So we have that column missing. But the good thing, or the powerful thing about pandas here is that it does automatically align your column headers. So no matter how the column headers are shuffled around in the other file, you will always pandas takes care of always aligning the same columns below each other. And so that's why we didn't have to do anything special, but it was automatically filling the non-existing values here with an AN, not a number in the floating point world. And so that's one thing that's super helpful, because it's almost practically impossible to combine different data frames and mismatching some of the columns. Whereas in Excel, depending on how you do it, this might be actually, you have to take care to not by accident, misaligning some data from one of the sheets. So that's a super nice thing to have here. And so, so what we've done so far is, as I said, we've just have one super big table here, and to get some sense out of that, we can basically do the same as we would do in Excel. We can just create a pivot table. And so, as you can see, there's this pivot table command. You give it the data, you give it, the information on what you want to see and what you want to basically use to aggregate. And so what we're doing here is in every row, we basically had a sales transaction in one of these stores here. And so now what we've done is we have now all the data aggregated to, the individual dates here. So we have a single date or a single day here where all the transactions are aggregated. And to make that even a little bit more easier to read, there you can resample, basically aggregate or group those days into calendar months. And also this is like one of the things that I find is just like, you know, so much basically one of the things that's lacking in Excel, right? Like working with date and time. I mean, Excel has, you know, limited sort of like support for that. There's no time zones, for example, in Excel. I find it a little bit, I always have to like, you know, look up how I can do operations with date and time in Excel. So here I literally just say, you know, give me the data resampled or like grouped by monthly buckets. And then we have basically the sum of our sales per month and per store. And so that's sort of like how you can use the pandas library together with Jupyter notebooks here as, so, you know, as an interactive environment, very much a competitor to what we do in Excel. And obviously, what can't miss is some good charting down here. So, I mean, you can really do like all the things that you would do in Excel. But as I said, what sometimes is a little bit, you know, off-putting for some of the less technical people is that you have all these, well, the code flying around. So then that's where like Excel often comes in again. Nevertheless, what I do love about Python here is that you can have access to really a lot of visualization libraries. This one here is called Plotly. You can, you know, say, okay, just give me the Boston one. You can selectively select or unselect certain time series here, or you can just zoom in and say, okay, let's just look at September and discuss, you know, what's going on in September. So that's super awesome. I believe that Excel should, by the way, Google Sheets too, they should really invest in the visualization, in my opinion. They have fallen behind quite a bit on that end. So the Excel charts are definitely perfect for printing, for static reports, but I would love if they would be a little bit more dynamic, like you know, these Plotly charts, for example. And so, but yeah, as I said, so at the end of the day, you still have to send the report as an Excel file to your boss, right? Because they usually aren't as technical as you are, most likely. And so what you can do now, still using pandas, only pandas, you take, for example, that summary and you just say to Excel with the file name, and then that gives you a report that should turn out here, sales report pandas. And so, you know, with a single command, we basically have the report or our data frame back into a spreadsheet, and we can do some more work in here and send it off as a report to our boss. So that's pretty much like the full circle of how you interact with pandas and Excel files. Often you may not have you know, an Excel file as a data input. In that case, you can directly connect with a database. You can connect to CSV files. You can connect to like any more you know, specific file format that may come out from whatever system you're trying to analyze. And so that is pretty much the first part of the of this demo. So that was the part where we are using pandas, let's call it a Python version of a spreadsheet. We're using pandas to read in Excel files, and we're using pandas to produce an Excel report. Well, in the middle there was, you know, the reshuffling of data, the cleaning and the pivot table. So that was an easy way to, like, you know, walk through a whole directory of different workbooks and get the summary statistics on that. Yeah, as I said, no Excel required, so you can run this on a Linux server, which is pretty awesome if you have like automated data pipelines that you need to take care of. Now, in that second part of the demo, I would like to switch sides and show you how xlwings, you know, the functionality that xlwings offers you. And there's a couple of things that you can xlwings use, that you can use it for. And one of the things that some people have ended up using it for extensively, me included, is to just use it as a data viewer for you know, debugging purposes, let's say. And we're gonna continue in the Jupyter notebook to demo that. And then we're gonna see like how we can also produce reports with xlwings, but unlike the previous demo, we can actually open that Excel file and, you know, just fill in some values and respect all the formatting of the existing file. So we're not gonna like throw away anything, or we don't have to start from scratch. So that's another little thing we're gonna look into. And then I'm gonna show you like how you can also use Excel with xlwings, which is basically building tools, like building applications. And yeah, if time allows, we can have a look at user-defined functions. They are only supported on Windows. And that's pretty much gonna wrap up the second demo here. So as I said, most important part here is you need a working Excel installation. So this only works on Windows or Mac here, and the UDFs will only work on Windows. Right. So then yeah, let's just continue right here where we left it. And as I was showing you like in the preview of this part of the demo, xlwings is often just used to make the data visible. So I mean, you don't always deal with millions of rows of data, right? I mean, you may just have, I don't know, 20, 100, 1,000. I mean, that's still super manageable in Excel. And sometimes, I mean, you know, when we scroll back up here, sometimes that's just a bit annoying to have this like, you know, dotted line in the middle and not being able to like really scroll through the data. And so like that's like where this xlwings view function comes in. So you would just use the view function and give it whatever, you know, whatever data you want to look at. And then so that was the summary basically. That was sort of that thing, I believe. Yeah. So that was the summary data frame here. And so as you can see, by doing the view function, by using the view function on that summary data frame, it just pops up a new Excel workbook. It formats it as an Excel table. So, you know, easy for you to do some little analysis here, whatever you need to do, right? That's pretty cool. So like if you want to really look at the data, then that's a good way to handle it. And then you can also do the other way around. So you can just like, you know, select a range here and then say load that data, and then you have the data from an Excel spreadsheet back in the Python world. And so again, like unlike the reader libraries that we were looking at before, this is basically live, right? So like if I change a number here, and if I do that again, then I will have my number back here. Okay, I missed the header, but you get my point, right? So you would have the number basically read in directly from the Excel application, and I do not need to store or save that Excel workbook first on disk. And the reader libraries, they will require you to save the Excel workbook on disk first. So depending on the use case, that can be helpful sometimes, mostly for this kind of interactive work. But yeah, so that's really just like a data viewer. So that's not like how you would use xlwings to program scripts, let's say, for automation. What you would do is you would use the standard xlwings API. And so if you have ever worked with VBA, then that should, you know, feel super familiar to you. So basically, you just give it, well, the path to your workbook, and then you can refer in the dotted syntax here .sheets, and then specify the name of the sheet or the index. And so what this does here is it opens here in the background, it has opened one, well, the template that I was that I had in the same folder. So this guy here, the sales report template. So by just, you know, specifying it in the book, it opens it. Now we do have like the sheet variable, which refers to the first sheet here. And as you can see, this is a template. So it's already got like a chart on it. It's already got some colors and a title on it. So all I need to do now is I need to assign that's usually not so slow. You just need to assign the data frame here to a top left corner of where you want to have it, right? So it's extremely easy for you to work with those data frames or whatever arrays that you are working with in the Python world. You just give it a top left corner in Excel, and then that will write it out for you. And you can also see, like, you know, given the red colors here, there was also some conditional formatting applied. So it's sort of like really combining these two worlds together. So like we're leaving, in this case, we're leaving the, yeah, you can see, I mean, it's a bit, something's happening, maybe an update or something that's slowing down Excel. Anyhow, it basically just pastes the data, and you can do all the formatting beforehand. So that sort of like frees up a lot of your time from having to format a report in code. So that's sort of like what's, you know, what's the sense behind that. Then you can also use a couple of commands that rely really on like the Excel engine, on the Excel calculation. So they can do pretty much all the things you would traditionally do in VBA, right? You can do and call it from Python in a Pythonic syntax here. So for example, the auto fitting the columns here that I just did, whatever usually it needs to be. And then again, you save the file, and that's it. So you're basically ready to send that off to your boss. And I mean, compared to before, what we achieved here was sort of like, you know, the same amount of code, pretty much just one line to have the data sent over. But you got a report that is sort of pre-formatted and a little bit nicer to send out. You can absolutely do the same with the writer packages. And there's some samples in my book how you can do that. You can also find the example code on GitHub, but it does require you to code quite a lot just to achieve this little report here. So it depends a little bit on your skills or on your time. But again, this workbook here, the report generation, works on Mac or Windows. It does not work on Linux. So if you would like to have this as part of your you know, of your web page, download an Excel report, then you would have to use basically a technology based on the writer packages or pandas, for example. All right. So at this point, I guess what I would love to do is sort of like show you the other big use case of what xlwings is being used for. So, I mean, so far we've seen over here, we've seen basically two things. We've seen xlwings being used as an interactive data viewer for your pandas data frames. We've seen xlwings as a scripting language, basically as a drop-in replacement for VBA, so you can automate Excel from Python. And then what also a lot of people do is they use Excel as a user interface. And so what I've built here, and I'm going to link to the source I have the source basically of all these files on the slides. So yeah, I believe Faraz told me I can put in the links here. So let me just quickly search it here. So yeah, so I can actually post both of these links. So the first one is the one from my book. Let me just post that in the chat. And then the other one is going to be the one that we are going to look at right now. So the first one, you will find, for example, the sales data sample files that we looked at before. And the second one is the xlwings remote simulation, is really the one that we're going to look at right now. And so this is going to be a sample that, as such, relies on the pro functionality, which, as I said, is free for non-commercial use. However, you can also build it using the traditional open source version of xlwings. The reason why I want to show you the pro version here is that it's sort of like it's the new thing. And the number one questions I always get when I show xlwings, or when I introduce xlwings to people, is like, how do I give my workbooks to somebody else, and do they need Python installed on their system? And so, like, for pretty much almost 8 years, my answer has always been yes, they will actually need Python installed, and they will need all your dependencies installed. And that is like where things start to become a little bit complicated sometimes, because not everybody is like mastering the installation of Python as good as you are as the developer. And so that sometimes is a bit of a struggle that I have, that people have. So what I recently introduced on the xlwings side is a remote interpreter. And what that means is basically you're building a web server. You're just building a web server, but you can use the traditional xlwings syntax. And so this is pretty awesome for a couple of reasons. So one of the reasons is it just works, right? So you give just somebody that Excel file, and they click the button, and then it just works. And what happens in the background now is that basically it talks to a server that I host on the internet, but that can absolutely be on your intranet. So it doesn't have to be company external. And that sort of like also gets rid of a lot of the issues, with deploying updates to everybody of your users. And it really just, I mean, you can look at it as if this would be like a web app, but instead of looking at it here in the browser, you look at it in Excel. And so that's like, the area where people are familiar with. You give them like, the area, like a tool they know how to use. And so they can just really play around with it, change the inputs here, and move on with their lives. And well, just by the way, so what it shows you here is, or what it does in the back end is it simulates, it does a Monte Carlo simulation with a lot of pseudo random numbers. This could be some stock or some fund that moves over time, and then you can see here sort of like the 90% interval of where the asset price most likely moves around. So and you can change the inputs here and run it with different characteristics. And so like what happens in the background is basically you have like 10,000 simulations and 40 time steps. So it's like almost 500,000 pseudo-random numbers that you generate. And in my career as a banker, I've seen a lot of people who came up with Excel workbooks, and they had their, they were using like whatever, like random number formula here, and they were having a couple of thousand, pseudo-random numbers. The workbook becomes huge. It's super slow and probably not the way that Excel was meant to be used. But the other way that this new technology of the remote interpreter opens up, and that's sort of like why I'm so excited about, is that you can use it on all the platforms. And by all the platforms, I mean not just Excel on Windows and Mac, but also, for example, on Google Sheets. So this is the same workbook on Google Sheets. I can run the script and I will get my data back here on Google Sheets. And Google Sheets is just awesome because it's still so much ahead of the Excel online version. You could, get the user authenticated from the Google identity. You can give them certain permissions to do stuff. That's pretty awesome. But nevertheless, there's also Excel Online. And I mean, I have to say that it gets better every month, I guess. It gets, better and faster. So just until a couple of months ago, you couldn't even put like a button on the sheet. So that's currently there now. And again, that is using the same backend code as the Google Sheet version. It's using the same backend code, basically the same server installation as the offline, or not the offline, but the desktop version of Excel. And so that is sort of like the latest addition to xlwings, being able to centrally install Python, getting rid of the deployment headaches, and also make it ready for the the future generation of spreadsheet applications, which happen to be somewhere either on office.com or on Google Sheets. That's sort of like what I had in mind for presenting today. There is one more demo I could add, but I thought I would rather ask you first not to sort of like drag it on for too long. And maybe people prefer to just have like a bit of Q&A at this point. So yeah, I leave it on. I can do one more little demo with user-defined functions on Windows, or we can jump right ahead to Q&A. I'll let you guys decide on that.
Yes. Let me check in the chat meanwhile. Great. That's good. Maybe we can do that quick demo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that user defined. That would be interesting.
Okay. So, all right. So this is on Windows here because that's sort of the only functionality that is only working on Windows these days. So what I do have here is a little function. And as you can see, the function is really just saying, well, you give it an X and it gives you back .core. And .core is obviously going to give you back the correlation from basically the input matrix. And this is going to work because I'm going to say, okay, whatever I'm reading in is going to be treated or should be transformed, converted into a pandas data frame. And pandas data frames, they do have this easy method, which is called .core. And so it's super easy for me. I want to have a correlation method that works sorry, I'm trying to like trying to get rid of the Zoom control here, but somehow
And I know that's quite funny because I always experience the same thing, Felix.
yeah, okay, never mind. That doesn't seem to be compatible with Excel in presentation mode on VM. Anyhow, I can manage. So basically, you the issue with Excel is you have the Corel function, but the Corel function only accepts two time series, right, or two data series. And so I would have like I have here, these are again like stock tickers, and these are like return data. So like to get the correlation between all these returns of all those stocks, I would have to put in a lot of like Corel functions. And so for me, that's a little bit too cumbersome. So what I can do is, after importing those functions, I can use my Corel2 function here. And that then, select all the data here. Yep, click on enter. And again, it's a little bit laggy. I feel like whenever I like share the screen, it does a bit funny stuff. But anyhow, it's here. So as you can see, it's here. It's the full correlation matrix. It comes including the labels, which is pretty nice. So I mean, that's a pandas feature. And I literally had 0 to code. So I just had to say, x.core. So that's super simple to manage. And then as the final part of that little demo, you can also use basically Python plots. And so I have this little function that then generates a heat map in the Python world, so using the matplotlib library. And okay, I may have pressed like again on the wrong button here. So there you go, and it gives you back the like a Python chart, basically matplotlib chart with a heat map representation of that correlation. And then so if you would go and manipulate the source data, then the chart here will update. Again, tiny little bit slower than it usually feels, but then you can see it updates, and you have this sort of like 0 correlation where we fixed the return. So that's like what works. That's by the way, that's part of the open source package. It works unfortunately currently only on Windows, but it's possible that this actually will be extended to the other platforms using the new remote interpreter. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, if you have any questions, then please shoot, and I'm going to be happy to answer them.
There's one question in the chat by Neil.
Oh. So yeah, there seems to be some overlap between xlwings and the reader-writer packages. Are there any advantages of reader-writer packages over xlwings or vice versa? Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say, so as I initially said, I mean, it's not like one is better than the other. It's like they perfectly coexist, and they are usually basically working together, or like they're complementary, right? So an advantage that the reader and writer libraries have, definitely they can work without Excel. I mean, that's a huge advantage, right? I mean, Excel is like for automation purpose, it wasn't made for automation. So like it can be buggy, it can be slow. You need Windows usually to have, to automate a report. So definitely big win for the writer packages on that end. The reader package is definitely super helpful to just read in the values. So I mean, I would say like for, if for the sample that we looked at, initially for like aggregating the data from different Excel workbooks, that is definitely where you should use the reader packages, either directly or through pandas, because that's going to be faster. You do not have to rely on Excel. And that's just like sort of like what they were made for. On the other hand, xlwings has obviously an advantage for building user interfaces, right? Like, I mean, you have this interface and you want to build something interactively. You don't want people to have to like save the workbook to be able to work with. I mean, that's where xlwings comes in. You want to write a user-defined functions. Obviously, that's not available in the reader writer functions. The overlap sort of really gets in here when I guess for reporting. And so like initially, you know, I didn't build xlwings for reporting purposes. I actually built it for like interactive tooling, for building interactive tools. But where they do have an overlap, which is much bigger than I initially thought, is for reporting. And I guess as much of a disadvantage it is that with xlwings you rely on Excel, you know, the big, you have a big advantage of being able to perfectly design the Excel file beforehand, and xlwings will respect everything that you have in there because it's really just automating Excel. So, you know, Excel can't really tell whether it's done by a human or a machine. Whereas the writer ones, I mean, first of all, you do need to write a lot of code, and second, you can't really you can really edit any existing files. I mean, OpenPyXL does have an editing functionality, but it, you know, it really like reads the file and like rebuilds it with all the things it can do. But then it would get rid of, let's say, you know, a chart title or some of the things it doesn't support. So like if you need to have if you need an automation that leaves your complex Excel workbook 100% intact, 100% the way it should be, then xlwings is the safe bet here. If the report is sort of like a data dump, maybe a chart, a simple chart, and you start from scratch, I mean, you know, perfectly fine to do it with a writer package. So that's sort of like where the two worlds overlap, or like, you know, have advantages depending on the use case.
Oh, perfect. Lovely, Felix. That was great.
Yeah, hope you could get an idea.
Yes, yes, we got a lot of idea, and maybe we need to continue the session of Python, you know, in multiple batches, you know, because I know it's a vast, it's a huge concept which need to be gradually covered up. Let me check the chat on the YouTube if you have anything. Okay, okay. There's a question from Ivan on YouTube. What is the advantage of using the Python instead of VBA?
Yeah, so I mean that sort of like goes back to one of the early slides I showed. I mean, mostly it's got all the scientific packages, right? So you want to do some machine learning, you know, you have a couple of different packages you can choose from in Python. You want to connect with some API of a specific system. You want to have the latest packages to access your databases in an efficient way, and then do some data munging on top of it. Then that is where Python is just incredibly good. It's you know, it's got all like the modern features. I mean, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, if you just like, if you want to like you know, if you use VBA to, let's say, just color a couple of cells or format a book, or maybe like add a new sheet and then drop a few numbers in it. I mean, that's not like where you have to make a switch to Python. I mean, for formatting purposes, VBA is actually super great at it. But if you talk to external tools, like you download stuff from the internet, you want to do web scraping, you want to do, you have, you know, some authentication that you need to do on that remote machine or API that is maybe not supported out of the box in Power Query, or it's not a table that you want to, you know, read out of a web page, then Power Query gets to a stop very quickly, and you can probably work around a lot of issues if you invest a lot of time. But then why would you do that if in Python there is a package, you know, available to do exactly this, and you write 2 lines of code and you're done with it, right? So that's like where it makes sense to look on the other side. You know, if everything you do is perfectly doable, I mean, you don't hit any roadblocks in Excel VBA or maybe Power Query, then I would say don't worry about it. But like, as soon as you find yourself Googling and copy pasting code, at this point, you know, if it gets super difficult, then, or, you know, error prone, then it's a good moment to see what's available here.
Cool. I think we are going to hit the clock, and now it's time to end the live stream, but we'll be still there back on the Zoom after party. We say that. But thank you, Felix, for joining today and giving us this bright knowledge about Python. It was really a subject, you know, which, thank you for covering up in Saudi Arabia meetup, you know, which was very important for the community. And I really appreciated your efforts and time on this one. And before I end my YouTube video, I usually ask my speaker, you know, any last and final words. It could be a quote or anything, you know, you wanted to say to the YouTube audience, and then we can just end the session.
Nothing prepared. I would just say, well, stay curious. If you haven't dabbled in Python before, why not like give it a go, you know, just like an hour or two. There's a ton of material out there. You can run a Python session completely in the browser, especially if you're just starting out. There's like hosted environments, so you don't need to install anything locally. You can dabble around, you can get a feeling for it, and then maybe next time you have an issue in your existing tool set, you know, it might be the right moment to have a go. And I mean, at the end of the day, you only know if you like something once you tried it out. So yeah, stay curious. That's my parting words.
That's it, guys. So it was Felix, my friend from Switzerland, and I'll see you soon in my next meetup session. So stay connected on the meetup, and don't forget about My Data Summit, my friends. So if you haven't registered your tickets, go and grab them now, and we'll see you at the summit. Take care. Bye from YouTube. We're still back on Zoom.
Bye-bye.